How does transition into another wirehouse compare to transition into the RIA model? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 140. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where we help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, head on over to transitiontoria.com, where you can find all of the resources we make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. There's articles, there's white papers, there's a vendor profile series, all kinds of things, again, to help you understand the model. Head on over to transitiontoria.com. Okay, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about if you're at a wirehouse now and you're pondering perhaps moving to a different wirehouse for whatever your motivations are, you're not satisfied at your current firm, or you believe the grass might be greener elsewhere, and you're trying to decide whether to move to another wirehouse or, hey, should I look at this RIA model and maybe that's a fit for me? And so I did want to kind of give you some breakdowns of some of the variables to consider if you're perhaps leaning on that wirehouse to wirehouse move, just to understand the things you will essentially be given up by not going to the RIA model. Now, I will start by saying, as I often do in these episodes, the RIA model is not for everyone. So I don't get on here and say, oh, every advisor and every team and every practice is a fit for the RIA model or is going to be where the advisor team is going to be most satisfied. That's not the case. Now, not just most cases, it generally is. But there is, and I respect this, a subset of advisors out there that say, hey, at the end of the day, I just want to be a financial advisor. I want to be a practitioner of the craft. I don't also want to be a business owner of running my own business with my practice. Now, I get it. The wirehouses sometimes would, and this is kind of harsh to point out, but the wirehouse would say, oh, you're running your own business. You're running a business. No, you're not. You're W-2 for a company. You have to play by their rules. And so, yes, you're running your own practice, but to be certain, that's a entirely different arrangement than being a true business owner and all the benefits that come with that. Now, that said, again, there's a subset of advisors, and I respect this, that said, okay, I get it, Brad. You can talk about the better economics and the better flexibility and all the things I'm going to talk about on this episode. I'm willing to leave all that on the table because that also comes with additional responsibilities. And I'd rather just be an advisor, a practitioner. I make a very nice income. I like my clients and I'm content. And I will always respect that. And I think that will always exist out there in the marketplace. The wirehouses, while they are bleeding advisors to the RIA channel, they will always exist because there are folks that is just going to be a better fit for them based on what that particular advisor team desires. But if you are that advisor that's considered, okay, hey, yeah, that's been my world so far, but maybe a different path, this RIA model is better. Again, that's what we're going to kind of dive into here. And one of the big things you typically hear about this wirehouse to wirehouse move, in part because arguably of the four main wirehouses, and we can start to throw in some W-2 models of the so-called regional firms, which some of those themselves are growing quite large. So we'll just kind of encapsulate that W-2 broker-dealer model by calling it the wirehouse model. They're not massively different from one another, right? The one, arguably, of the four so-called wirehouses is not massively different from another one. Yes, over time, there's certainly been some reputational damage of some, and there's reasons advisors might lean more towards one than another, but the technology at one is not massively different than the other or another. The available investment solutions is not massively different than another. The comp plan, which I'll rant about here in a moment, is not massively different. Obviously, it is different from one firm to the next, but they're all trying to be competitive with each other. So oftentimes, and I'm not saying this is the sole reason by any means advisors go from one wirehouse to another, is that proverbial upfront check, and everyone, or a lot of people want to talk about the deals that are going on in the marketplace. What kind of deal can I get if I leave my wirehouse and go to another? What's that big upfront check, that big upfront bonus look like? And obviously I'm oversimplifying it because there's generally, yes, a big chunk of money up front, but then you got to hit hurdles in the back end, all that sort of thing, well beyond the scope of this episode. But the point being is that's often one of the enticing things is, wow, if I make that move, I can get this big giant upfront check, which, by the way, if you go to the RIA model, you're not going to get that big upfront check. Now, that's assuming you're not selling to some sort of RIA kind of roll-up or aggregator kind of firm. And if you're selling your practice, that's a whole different conversation. But if you're moving, for instance, to your own RIA, or you're joining an RIA platform as a 1099 advisor, there typically could be some money involved to help with the transition, but it's not that big upfront check. And so that's oftentimes why you see, or one of the motivators of advisors or teams that are going from one wirehouse to another. They'll, of course, never say that. It's always, oh, wow, the technology is better over here. And again, it's arguably not meaningfully different, so the check does come into play. But the challenge with the check is that feels good to get that check. And for some of you, that could be a very large check that goes in your pocket. But you have to appreciate all the strings that come with that. And then again, that's a lot of what we're going to cover here is what are those variables that you're now having to deal with, that you're giving up by not going on an RIA path. And keep in mind, when you get that big upfront check, again, there's usually hurdles and it's back-ended road, but let's just hypothetically, for easy conversation, say it's upfront on the front end, and people feel, wow, I'm getting that big check, I'm getting that upfront bonus, whatever we want to call it. No, that firm is not gifting you money. That's not a gift. That's not them being generous. That basically is just them enabling you to pull forward your future income and get paid out now, and as a result, get paid out less over the years to come than if you were to go in a different path where you could get higher amounts of income as you went. So, and for some folks, it could be enticing, whatever their personal economic circumstances, that maybe they need some sort of immediate big chunk of money. But make no mistake, that is not a gift. That is not generosity. They are simply basically pulling your future income forward, and at the same time adding significant handcuffs to your ability to run your practice by essentially enabling this to happen for you to get some of that money sooner than spread out over perhaps the balance of your career. So with that context, I want to go over some of these things that for those of you that are considering going wirehouse to wirehouse, even with that check you'll receive, some of the things you will be giving up as opposed to going on an independent RIA path. So the first one, and I think this is just so overlooked, is when you get that check, there is a commitment of time you have stated, right? It technically is a loan that technically is, there's no really such thing as a forgivable loan. Basically what's happening is it's often referred to as a loan bonus. That's technically a loan to you, and then the firm is bonusing you over time, basically paying down the loan with those bonuses, which then creates additional headaches of kind of phantom income that you have to pay taxes on over time. But basically they are giving you that money up front, and in many instances nowadays, that's a give or take 10-year commitment for you staying. Maybe a little shorter, 9 years I've heard. I've also heard it get pushed out to 12 plus years, which I think is just insanity. But keep in mind, let's just call it 10 for simplicity. So you're getting that money, you're committed to stay there 10 years. Now, yes, to be fair, at some point in that juncture, you want to leave, you can, but you will owe back not the unvested portion of the bonus, because technically what's happening is it's a loan that's getting paid down. So whatever the balance of the loan is, yes, you can pay that back and still leave. But from a psychological standpoint, that can be difficult. From a cash flow standpoint, that can be difficult if you have not set that money aside. So effectively, mentally, you got to think about you're locking yourself in for, call it 10 years. Again, sometimes could be longer. And what I think is often overlooked, and I think is crazy, is you, by taking that check, you are committed to 10 years of uncertainty of what that firm is going to provide for you going forward. So just a couple examples. And we're in kind of, as I'm recording this, the season of the annual comp plan changes. That's a whole rant I could do on an entire other episode, that the fact that if you're at a wirehouse, you work for a firm that changes your composition annually is absurd, but here we are. But by taking that check and committing to 10 years, you're committing to, and their track record is they do this every year, 10 years of future changes about how you are going to be compensated, and you have no idea what those changes are going to be when you're signing on to this up front. All you know is that there will be changes, and yet you're just accepting their word for it that hopefully that works out in your favor. I don't want to spoil anything, but when wirehouses make comp plan changes, they're not doing it for the advisor's benefit. They're doing it for the bottom line of the firm, and hopefully, yes, to retain advisors, but don't think their lens that they look through the comp changes are, how can we more reward our advisors? It's to the bottom lines, to the shareholders, it's to trying to grow revenue and income. So by taking that upfront check, you've now committed to perhaps 10 years of these changes, which you have no idea what that's going to be. Another example, perhaps you really like the branch manager at the branch you're going to be joining, and that's perhaps part of what is attracted you to make this change. Well, who's to say that branch manager is going to be there for the balance of the 10 years that you've now effectively locked yourself in? That branch manager could leave 18 months later. They bring in some other branch manager. All of a sudden, you have no idea what you are getting with that new branch manager. Are they going to be an ally of yours, an advocate of yours? Are they going to make business more difficult for you? You don't know. And so I could go on and on about this, but the idea being, do not overlook, you're taking a check and you're locking yourself into 10 years of uncertainty that you have little to no control over many of these variables. And the next variable, and I talked about, yes, there's a benefit of taking a big check and you get to put money in your pocket, but in turn for that, you're now going to be making less income going forward than you could in most scenarios if you went to the RIA model. So what you should really be doing from an exercise standpoint of the economics is not looking at how much money goes in my pocket on year one after I've made a move, because unless you plan on retiring after year one and then all bets are off, how all this upfront bonus and stuff works, but unless you plan on retiring after year one, you need to consider essentially the balance of your career, but let's just say for simplicity, the 10 years. So you need to factor in, yes, I'll get this big extra cash dump in year one, and then here's kind of where my payout's going to be over the balance of 10 years, again, with no certainty that it's going to stay at that level. Or do you take less money up front, but have the potential to make a oftentimes meaningfully higher income over the balance of those years? And you then have to run that math in aggregate and say, yes, in year one, the wirehouse move works out because look at this big check I put in my pocket. Hey, in year two, I could have been making higher income. I'm still better off because of that big check I got. But you can run that math, and it typically takes a couple years for where the comparison would be of not taking a big upfront check, but taking a higher income, or taking a big upfront check and taking a lower income. Just run that aggregate math, and eventually those lines cross, and it typically crosses well before you get to that 10-year point. So you got to factor in the total aggregate economics of this 10 years that you're now about to commit to versus what you could potentially achieve economically over the comparable 10 years on an RIA path, and without all of these strings that I'm alluding to here. So you need to understand how those economics work. Obviously, that's a big part of what I do. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. And then you need to do that math and be true to yourself. Are you really looking at the big long-term picture when it comes to economics? Another variable you are accepting if you're sign on for a 10-year move because you're going wirehouse to wirehouse is you are accepting that deferred comp is part of how you are being paid. And granted, that's probably what you've already been stuck dealing with at your current wirehouse. All the wirehouses do deferred comp, unless one wants to raise the flag and do away with it and the others maybe have to follow. I don't see that happening. They've all ingrained it into their kind of culture that they're going to do this. And you have to appreciate what deferred comp is. Now, wirehouses will go and spin this as if it's some sort of reward to their advisors for their longevity and their loyalty. And wow, we're invested in you going forward. No, that's not at all what's going on. You, as the advisor, are earning revenue by providing services for your clients. You're earning fees and or commissions on behalf from your clients for the services you are providing them. Your firm then gives you a payout on the money you have earned. But from that payout, then they say, hey, we're going to arbitrarily take some of that you've already earned. You deserve to be paid. And we are going to arbitrarily defer it years into the future and not pay it to you for years from now. And the only reason they are doing that is to handcuff you to the firm, because they know that the more they can build up in this deferred comp pool, the harder it is for you to ever leave, because you have to walk away from that. And the only way you can generally get all of your deferred comp, and they know this, the firms know this, is to ride out the balance of your career and eventually retire through their often referred to as sunset plan. I'll allude to it in a moment, which, by the way, generally has much lower valuation than you could get in the RIA model, worse taxation of your practice. But you have to ride out the balance of your career with all these handcuffs, inferior economics, and then go through this inferior succession arrangement. And if and only if you do that, then they make good and pay you out all of the deferred comp. Because otherwise, by design, they purposely have made these deferred comp arrangements that you can never get off the treadmill if you don't do what I just described. So yes, and maybe this is a 5-year, is typically what that deferred comp range is, that they pay you money, and in 5 years, yes, it does come free to you and you get it. It's essentially vested, but they've just started a brand new 5-year tranche this year with what they've taken out of your income and now deferred it another 5 years. And you can never get off this ongoing treadmill without losing money. They absolutely know what they're doing. Don't let anyone convince you that that's somehow to your benefit. That is to arbitrarily keep you at the firm. They're not saying, hey, let's keep you at the firm by providing you such good value and service that you wouldn't want to leave. They're saying, no, we're gonna economically hurt you by taking the income you've earned now and deferring it into the future so that you will lose it if you ever want to leave us. And imagine if that was how you treated your clients, that they were paying you or something and you weren't going to provide them services for 5 years into the future because they need to be loyal to you. And so, yeah, they'll pay you now, but if they don't stick around, they don't get the services. I mean, that's absurd. You would never attempt to do something like that with your clients, but yet that's what wirehouses do. So if you sign on for that wirehouse to wirehouse transition, you're signing on for another, give or take, 10 years minimum of that deferred comp treadmill that you can't get off of without essentially losing income you've already earned. I'll leave my rant on that. You can tell I'm passionate about that. All right, the next example of something you give up by going wirehouse to wirehouse is the operated leverage inherent in having your own RA or joining on a 1099 basis in RA. And so what I'll give you an example of what I mean by operating leverage. So as your own RA or 1099, you are responsible for your so-called local expenses. And I did a whole episode on that, so you can check that out. But one of those variables you're responsible for is your office. Now, and I'll allude to some of the advantages of the real estate here in a second. But from an office perspective, let's say you lease an office, you go on an independent path, you lease an office, and then as you grow the practice, keep in mind, every time you add one incremental client, the cost of your office lease does not go up, right? You have operating leverage. That office lease is relatively fixed. Now, I know, yes, there's probably small annual increases, property taxes, but for the most part, it's fixed. So you can grow your practice 10%, 20%, 30%, and this big piece of your expense pie is not going up in lockstep with it. That is operating leverage, but you have the ability to gain yourself from that operating leverage. When you're in a wirehouse world, part of what they are providing for you, and to credit, they do provide you with things in that inverse of your payout. One of those is they are providing you an office. Well, guess what? They are getting the operated leverage of that, because as you incrementally bring on new clients and increase your revenue, they continue to take more and more out from your payout on a dollar basis. And so keep in mind, you can say, well, as I grow my practice, I go into a higher payout bucket. But there is a top end range. So for simplicity, let's say you grow your practice to that top end range. Every time you grow or add on a new client and grow revenues, you're maxed out. You're not going higher than whatever that percentage is, but every incremental new dollar in revenue bring in, you're still paying more and more in dollar terms to the Wirehouse. And at the same time, that office they're providing for you, it's not like, oh, every time you grow 10%, they give you a 10% bigger office, or if you double your practice, you get double the office size. No, they have that operating leverage. When you're in the RIA space, you get to take advantage of that. So definitely something to think about. The office is just one example of that. And kind of related to it, and I've done a whole episode on the real estate advantage of an RIA path, you also have the extraordinary opportunity, perhaps with your own RIA or on a 1099 basis, to, it depends on where you live and if this is feasible, to own the office facility or building that you use for your practice going forward. And if you were going to be in the game for another, say, 10, 15, 20 years, and you were going to pay in one fashion or another for office space, whether it's embedded in a Wirehouse payout or you're paying a lease, or the opportunity to buy something, and because you have to pay, again, in one fashion or another for the footprint of an office that you're going to use. Imagine over the 10, 15, 20 year balance of your career, you're instead buying an asset that you got to pay this money anyways. You might as well be accumulating an asset alongside it. And for some of you, that could be a significant additional asset that you have available to you at the end of your career, that not only are you selling your practice, you're also now selling this asset as well. So huge advantage. You do not get that if you go Wirehouse to Wirehouse. Another thing with the Wirehouse to Wirehouse move is keep in mind, it is what it is. If you look at the tax code, the tax benefits of being a business owner or a 1099, which you're a business owner in that regard, versus W-2 income is substantial. I won't go into all the details here, but your ability to write off expenses or depreciate an asset, perhaps if you have a building and offset income in those fashions. There's all kinds of additional benefits. It is what it is. It's the tax code to being a true business owner versus receiving your income on a W-2 basis. I probably should do a whole separate episode on that, but absolutely something to be aware of as well. You do not get that if you go Wirehouse to Wirehouse. And then the last two things, and I'll wrap up just with a few final thoughts, is, of course, if you go Wirehouse to Wirehouse, you continue to be managed, as they say, to the lowest common denominator. So if you were going from one Wirehouse that has 10,000 plus advisors to another Wirehouse that has 10,000 plus advisors, they are managing their compliance. They have to. There's 10,000 plus advisors. Unfortunately, there's a couple knuckleheads in there. They don't know who the knuckleheads are. So they have to manage to make sure the knuckleheads don't bring down the ship. Meanwhile, you, the more experienced, the more ethical, the more tenured advisor, gets stuck in the lowest common denominator approach to compliance, because, again, they have to do that because there's 10,000 plus advisors. If you, for example, go and start your own RA, and maybe it's you and a couple other advisors as a team, and there's maybe 6 of you as an example, well, guess what? You get to build your compliance that can accommodate the setup of a practice of 6 advisors, not 10,000 plus advisors. It is what it is. The compliance is going to be more flexible when you have to build a compliance apparatus that essentially accommodates 6, just to give an example, advisors versus 10,000 plus. And then the final kind of variable here, and I alluded to this earlier, is if you ride out that whole wave, you don't want to lose your deferred comp, so you never leave the firm, and then you have to go through their succession plan. In almost every instance, the so-called sunset programs in-house and wirehouse firms are inferior compared to what you could get in the RIA space, both on the valuation of your practice, that enterprise value, and very important, a lot of people overlook this, how the revenue or the income you receive from that sale can be taxed. In most cases on that independent side, the majority of it can be taxed at lower capital gains rates. If you're in the W-2 and you're doing the sunset program, you're still on the W-2 tax rates. I'm sorry, over on the independent side, this is capital gains. On the Wirehouse side, it's W-2 income tax rates, which for some of you could be close to twice as much as current capital gains rates. So you have to factor that math in as well. If you go Wirehouse to Wirehouse and you ride it out, yes, you got that big upfront check, But keep in mind, there's going to be a big liquidity event at the end, and it could potentially be, again, you got to run the math, happy to have that conversation with you, potentially be much better at that liquidity event down the road in the RIA space. So you have to look again at that aggregate picture. Don't just get caught up on what I get in the first year of that bonus check. You got to say, over the balance of my career, how's that math going to add up? So that's not an exhaustive list, just a couple things. You can obviously tell I'm passionate about this because I think a lot of advisors don't think all these variables through. Again, regardless of what I just said, I respect the fact that there are some advisors and teams that still say, you know what, that all sounds good, Brad, but I don't want the additional responsibilities to run my own RIA or running my local expenses, and I'll just put up with it. And I respect that, but for those of you that say, hey, let me learn more about, okay, what are those additional responsibilities? And if I'm able and willing to manage that and I get all those benefits as well, perhaps I do need to be considering that as well. So a couple quick just rebuttals I typically hear, either directly or in the press of how things are positioned from wirehouses or wirehouse advisors that say of why you shouldn't do what I'm suggesting you at least explore on the RIA side. So there was a time, thankfully this is a tired old excuse, but there's still some people that have been around a long time that are still using it that proclaim the RIA model is only for advisors and teams that aren't good enough to cut it at the wirehouses. Perhaps that was true 20, 30 years ago. That has not been the case for a very long time now. There are very large teams moving into the RIA model, have been for a very, very long time. Just here recently, there was a team, and actually the top line numbers even much larger because they have a whole retirement plan business as well. But even on just that traditional private wealth asset management part of the practice is close to 25 billion team left the wirehouse to go to the RIA model. So to suggest for anyone that's still holding on to that old tired line that somehow the RIA model is only for folks that can't cut it at the wirehouse, that is Exhibit A, and there's a gazillion other exhibits. That is a big marquee number, but there's plenty of advisors and teams, over 1 billion, just to give you an example, that have long since made that move. So don't let anyone tell you, oh, the RIA model is for advisors that can't cut it at the wirehouses. Again, that's an old, tired excuse. The next rebuttal sometimes you hear is that, oh, wirehouses have better resources. We have better technology. We have better investment solutions. We have better access to investment managers or alts. That is all false nowadays. There was a time that was accurate. There's a time that claim was fair. As I've talked about in different episodes, the RIA ecosystem has grown to the point that you not only hard-pressed and likely not possible at all, then you would find something that you have available to you in the wirehouse world, whether it's investment solutions or technology or whatever, that can't be replicated as is or replicated in a better solution in the RIA space. That topic's beyond the scope of this episode. I could rant about that for 20 minutes alone, but don't let anyone say, oh, we have better X at the wirehouse. At least take the time, talk to me to understand, okay, if supposedly that's true what they're saying, how would I replicate it, and what would I have available to me over the RIA space? If you're not already aware of how far the RIA model has advanced, you'll be very surprised. And as I said, in many, if not most instances, not only can you replicate what you have, you can have even better solutions, whether it's better flexibility, better options, better pricing, better technology, all those sorts of things. And then the final kind of rebuttal, this is not an exhaustive list either, is sometimes you'll hear wirehouses say, yeah, but end clients, particularly high net worth clients, they want the big name brand that we have on the side of the building, right? And I think there was a time that was probably accurate as well. That began to take a big hit during the global financial crisis where a lot of these firms were tarnished or had to be bailed out, and that reputation is not as strong as it once was. But regardless, if that's still important to you, keep in mind when you go on the RIA path, whether with your own RIA or joining one, a big part of what that arrangement is, and I talk frequently about all these variables, is you have a custodian. Sometimes you will eventually have more than one, but a custodian holds your client assets to the degree, and there's about a dozen custodians to choose from, but to the degree you still feel your clients want some sort of kind of big brand name behind you effectively, there are some wonderful custodians that have very respected, very well-known names in the industry that will go par to par with any name that you perhaps have on the side of the building now. So don't let that thought be a factor that, oh, my clients want to know where their assets are held. These custodians have trillions with a T, trillions, some of them, not all of them, but trillions with a T in RIA client assets on their platform. These are huge global firms. So from a name recognition standpoint, if that's your concern, that's not a problem either. You can solve for there. And then the final thing I'll leave you with, I could keep going on and on. I'm very passionate about this topic, is, and again, to reiterate, the RIA model is not for everyone. I don't want to give this impression I'm suggesting it is, but it does behoove you to at least take a look. Before you maybe make a wirehouse to wirehouse change, go ahead and educate yourself on that. Guess what? I'm not your guy to help you with that. I believe you can't be everything to everyone. I'm a specialist, not a generalist in this industry. So if you want to learn that, have at it. And then I say, just talk to me and compare what an RIA path would be to it. At least educate yourself, inform yourself. And at the end of the day, you make a decision that you still want to go on the wirehouse path. That's fine, but at least you'll have the confidence that you made a fully educated, a fully informed decision before doing so. But for many of you, if you take the time to learn it, you will discover, wow, that is the better path for my practice going forward. And my parting shot that I would leave you with is when you look at the industry trends, particularly over the last 10 years, the RIA model continues to be the fastest growing channel in the space. And the flow of advisors from the wirehouse model to the RIA model is again, that river is flowing. Ask yourself, have you ever heard of a RIA, so an advisor team that have an RIA that closed it down and went to the wirehouse model? That is non-existent. That river only goes in one direction, and you have to ask yourself, why is that? If the wirehouse model is supposedly superior, why do we not see RIAs almost of any size recognizing that supposing that superior closing down and going in that direction? It doesn't happen. And just whether you want to listen to all these variables I've just rattled off, just at least ask yourself that. Why does the river only go in one direction and it essentially never goes in the other direction? So with that, like I said, my name is Brad Wales with Transition to RIA. This is the sort of thing I help advisors and teams with all day long. Happy to have that conversation with you as well. First things first, though, head on over to transitiontoria.com, where you'll find this entire series in video format, podcast format. There's articles, there's white papers, there's a vendor profile series, all kinds of things to help you better understand the model. But at the top of every page is a contact link. Click on that and you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me, whether you want to talk about today's topic or anything else RIA related. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Again, transitiontoria.com. And with that, I hope you found value in today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.